Today's review, Macross Frontier. Subscribe for spoiler-free anime reviews covering series on Fridays and movies or OVAs the rest of the week. This review covers Macross Frontier and Macross Frontier Movies 1 and 2. Because this is a sequel series, this review will contain spoilers for the original Macross and minor spoilers for Macross 7. Frontier is set 14 years after Macross 7 on a totally different expedition aiming for the center of the galaxy. I don't know what's so special about the center of the galaxy. Are they trying to get sucked into a black hole or something? Either way, this journey brings a whole new set of complications, mainly the Vajra, a dangerous race of vicious creatures who act closer to wild animals than intelligent beings such as the Zentradi or Protoculture. Their unique bodies allow them to travel in space without being harmed by the vacuum and even fold, making them the greatest threat ever featured in Macross because of their ability to warp and surround colonies, outnumbering them and overpowering them instantaneously. The story follows Alto, who recently broke free of his restraints in a prominent lineage of famous kabuki actors in hopes of realizing his dreams of flying free in an open sky. His first job as pilot in training is to perform aerial stunts with his classmates during a Cheryl concert. Cheryl is the current pop idol phenomenon in the Macross universe. However, unlike her predecessors, she's self-centered, rude, and provocative. Her concerts are easily the flashiest we've seen to date. Aesthetically speaking, her shows are closer to Sharon Apples than anyone else, but of course, in traditional Macross fashion, concerts aren't allowed to end without a battle of some sorts, as the Vajra make their shocking debut by waging a sneak attack on a colony, breaching its hull, making their way inside to wreak havoc. Amidst the chaos and panic, Alto is reunited with his recent acquaintance Ranka, the emotionally fragile yet adorable young girl with a strong aspiration of becoming a pop singer herself. Then, realizing this life or death situation, Alto pilots the Valkyrie of a recently murdered soldier in an attempt to save their lives and escape. However, while his wingsuit has a similar control interface to the Valkyrie, his training is insufficient. His best bet is to struggle with the controls as they make their escape, barely surviving by the skin of their teeth as he increases his altitude at breakneck speeds to avoid buildings and the oncoming attacks from the Vajra. This event becomes the catalyst setting the plot into motion as Alto realizes his duty to protect those close to him by transitioning to a special private military force, the SMS, Strategic Military Services. From here, the overarching plot of defending against the Vajra attacks remains consistent for most of the anime. However, what keeps the anime interesting is its numerous developing characters and complications. As you'd expect for a Macross anime, there is a love triangle between Alto, Cheryl, and Ranka. Although these emotions manifest much earlier in the plotline than its predecessors, I'd say its romance arc plays out much closer to 7 than the original anime, which I appreciated. Although the original featured my favorite love triangle in anime, 7 and Frontier make the experience much more personal by depicting their love as just one of their many dynamic components that make up their character. In the beginning, Ranka was my ideal choice for Alto due to her honest and playful demeanor. She's innocent and emotionally vulnerable, but this vulnerability also comes with a reluctance for her to stand up on her own. I think many will favor Ranka's character in the beginning because Cheryl is a hard person to like. Not only is she living the life of an out-of-touch pop star, but she's downright spiteful towards everyone she considers beneath her. When the Vajra attacked during her concert, she left her thousands of fans to die as she escaped safely thanks to her private guards without concern for anyone else. What makes this love triangle so special is not that they both love Alto and occasionally have intimate moments with him, it's that their love is grounded despite how quickly it develops. There is a mutual connection between the three of them. Although Ranka and Cheryl are polar opposites, they become pretty close considering Ranka is inspired by Cheryl and Cheryl is impressed by Ranka's beautiful singing voice. In addition, they share a similar connection to Alto as he's heroically saved them on numerous occasions. Even Alto has significantly benefited from the two because their songs make his purpose clear and lift his spirits when he needs it the most. While Cheryl and Ranka have such conflicting personalities, I think they learn much from each other as Ranka gradually becomes more assertive, fighting for her dream, and Cheryl begins to soften her personality up a bit. At first, I expected Cheryl to be this obnoxious character throughout the entire series, making for a static love triangle, but thankfully both of these characters developed in a way that exceeded my expectations. The anime also puts a great deal of attention into developing its side characters by depicting their gradual personality change, interwoven backstories, relationships, ulterior motives, and even some of their deaths. Because the overarching plot of Frontier is so simplistic, depth is created by utilizing drama within their society. There's a big mystery slowly unfolding pertaining to the events which ultimately led to the destruction of Ranka's birth colony. Even the Zentradi are suffering from infighting as certain factions become restless with their state of galactic peace. Suppose you're a fan of the large Zentradi. In that case, you will enjoy certain parts of Macross Frontier as they visit the Zentradi homeworld, passing through old battlegrounds where their fallen ancestors still float in space perfectly preserved. Even aboard the Frontier, there are Zentradi sectors where we visit the shopping malls and see their massive clothing on sale, or Zentradi farmers towering over their cattle. Out of all of the Macross anime after the original, I feel like Frontier has the best Zentradi representation so far. It depicts their differing lifestyles and their individual choices to become mind clones or not. Like most earlier iterations, Macross Frontier also emphasizes the importance of peace. However, it's a notion not so easily understood considering the degree of infighting and conspiracies featured later in the plot, not to mention the Vajra attempting to obliterate them around every corner. In terms of action, I think Macross Frontier is one of the most impressive installments in the franchise. It's all late 2000s era CG animation, but it's remarkable for its time. It's not quite as detailed as Macross Zero, but it's close, which means it still looks better than most CG used in an anime today. There were times when my hair stood up on end as Valkyries flew past buildings shattering its glass, as energy beams hit their armor, melting it and watching pieces fall away, or when massive beams hit colonies, causing the metal to melt before exploding. The harrowing aftermath of war is even represented by human complacency and apathy towards their enemies and even comrades, perpetually developing increasingly powerful weapons to the extent they're now armed with what's essentially black hole bombs capable of cataclysmic destruction. Regarding Frontier's negatives, I think one glaring issue is how arbitrary and monotonous the Vajra feel at first. This is the first original enemy in the mainline Macross series, considering the proto-culture from 7 was mentioned in the original series and a point of interest for anyone who watched it. They did mention how the Vajra were the greatest enemies of proto-culture in an attempt to make them feel connected to the Macross universe, but from what I remember they were never mentioned in 7, which would have been the only time we would have heard about them prior to Frontier. I will admit, the Vajra don't feel as monotonous as the proto-culture vampires in early Macross 7, but at least they began developing around the halfway point. The Vajra eventually received some development towards the end, but it's the same thing for most of the anime. That can feel a bit repetitive to some. Thankfully, the battles were nicely animated, the stakes were high, and all of the other important plot points within the colony kept Macross Frontier from feeling like a Monster of the Week series. I also wish the series were several episodes longer to further detail its exposition regarding Ranka and Cheryl's backstories, considering its connection to the mysteries and plot twists later in the anime. Although there was enough exposition to understand what happened, it felt scant in comparison to its significance in the overall plot. I also thought Alto could have been developed a little more considering the degree Ranka and Cheryl's personalities evolved throughout the series. I also understand his life wasn't easy and it's hard to work through your emotions while you're in war, but I think the anime would feel much more fulfilling if he could completely sort out his feelings. I know Frontier comes a decade after 7, but I think it's just as big of a story as anything in the franchise to come before it. Macross 7 was 50 episodes, and they still had so much extra ground to cover that they made several additional entries just to give backstories to its main characters. Macross Frontier should have at least been as long as the original series, or maybe take the 7 route and supplement its story with additional entries. Regarding its extra content, Macross Frontier movies 1 or 2 are basically its Do You Remember Love version, so you probably know how I'll feel about these if you've seen my DYRL review. It dramatically improves visuals and combat and concerts. The original series already looked great, but these movies take it up a whole other level. However, like DYRL, I'm unsure what they're trying to accomplish because its story is dramatically different to the extent that I'd consider it contradictory. The main narrative focal points in the original Frontier was the war, character development, and romance. These movies change all of that. The war ends totally different from the series, the love triangle takes a totally different turn, and certain characters in the movies just never die when they should have. I marathoned Frontier in just over a day, then watched the 2 movies directly after. In my opinion, it cheapens the story, especially when I was left needing just a little bit more than what I got in the series. I wouldn't say that it's bad or that you shouldn't watch it because it's definitely fun and interesting considering so much has changed, but it's certainly certainly not a replacement for the original. In fact, I'd recommend checking them out if you haven't seen Frontier for a while and don't mind the story being altered. Overall, Frontier is a true Macross experience. It fits right in with all of the other series in regards to its themes, but it changes things up enough to remain fresh. It honors the Macross legacy by playing old songs from Firebomber on the radio and singing a few of Minmay's classics. There are numerous references and Easter eggs tying back to other entries, and Episode 10 even depicts the making of an in-universe film retelling the events of Macross Zero. Ironically, Cheryl is actually the granddaughter of the younger sister from Macross Zero. I give Macross Frontier an 8 out of 10. It's totally worth watching for all fans of the franchise and creates massive waves that will forever change the course of Universal history with its ending. I also recommend watching the 2 optional movies, as I give them both a 7 out of 10. If you'd like to see my reviews of other Macross anime, click this card up in the corner. The last stop on Project Macross is Macross Delta, which should be an interesting experience considering I felt so strongly opposed to it many years ago, though I didn't have the context I do today after watching all of the other series. I hope it can carry the torch just as well as the anime before it, but there's only one way to find out. What did you think of Macross Frontier and its movies? Like the video if you liked it. Thanks to Nia-chan and all of the Patreon and YouTube supporters for making these videos possible. If you'd like to support these videos, I've got links in the video description. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you tomorrow with Macross Delta.